I think the recording is going to start here. So there we go. All right. Well, welcome everyone to the Technology Review Council. My name is Novo Mana, CEO and founder of Collective HR Solutions, and we are doing this this session in conjunction with IREM. We've been getting some terrific marketing from IREM, and Anthony, I don't know if you saw the post, but I'll send it over to you. We got some really nice likes on before you even showed up, which is a great thing. So I'm very, very pleased. Anthony and I met at a conference probably about a month ago, and I was, we all seem to know what Babbel is all about. When everybody sees the commercials, hears about it, and so on. But Anthony and I engaged in a conversation, and he gave me an insight to what Babbel is doing that just hit home like you wouldn't believe. So instead of spoiler or alert, I'll let Anthony talk to us about this. But if you would please introduce yourself and then talk to us a little bit about it. And if you don't mind, I'm going to kind of hold on some of the questions. I'll watch the chat. Please put your questions in the chat, and then eventually we'll open up the mics towards the end, and we'll just let live questions come in. All righty, Anthony, you are on.
Great. Thanks so much, Nov. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for being here, taking the time out of your busy days. And I'm excited to share about what Babbel has been doing, for really the last 4 or 5 years in the United States, but for quite some time also in Europe, which we know is a hotbed of language as well. But just a little bit about myself right off the bat. My name is Anthony Gallardi. I am based out of Ann Arbor, Michigan, where earlier today it was snowing, and a week ago it was 80 degrees. So, we can't make up our mind, and that is typical. My background, though, is actually in education. It may not come as a surprise. I was a longtime public school teacher in Detroit, in New York City in the South Bronx, and eventually I returned home to be around family in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where I taught for some time as well. And upon leaving the classroom, I found myself working for an education technology company and at a nonprofit for a little bit. And I've been at Babbel now for some time, and it's been really exciting working at Babbel, specifically because I get to have conversations with every single industry as I'm learning more and more about the needs for language across manufacturing to healthcare, education, and all types of other things that I'm sure we could imagine. I actually just got off with an organization that owns greenhouses, and they're trying to make sure that they can give their Spanish-speaking workers the opportunity to learn English so that they can be a bit more independent outside of work, as well as a little bit smoother communication at work. So today, what I want to talk about is really the why behind language learning, what we're seeing people really gravitating toward in terms of language learning needs, and the results that we're seeing from our partners as they are investing in their people and the results they're seeing and how this is paying off. So without further ado, once again, I appreciate you all taking the time. By no means do I want this to be me just sitting here talking. I would love to get some people's feedback. So I'm just going to kick it off real quick. I'm going to ask you a question. Who here, I know a lot of people have heard of Babbel, but has anyone here ever used Babbel to explore learning another language? And feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
And just kind of jump in, because I'd love to just hear if anyone has even tried it before.
I think, unfortunately, you're not getting much.
No problem.
We're all embarrassed.
It's all right. Well, I'm going to share my screen here, and I'll be sharing my screen. I've got some slides prepared, but I'm also going to show you the product a little bit, because you know what? It's always fun to actually see what it looks like. And so real quick, language learning journey. So why do people come to us? And really, there's a lot of different reasons. And the first thing you see here is miscommunication impacts my efficiency when working with my colleagues. I don't feel confident presenting to colleagues or clients in my second language. And also, people, they want to learn, but there's no time for language classes with my busy work schedule. And so these are all common things that we hear. really the most common thing that we hear is that we've got managers and supervisors, at a manufacturing plant that want to be able to better communicate with clients, maybe overseas, or maybe they've got some individuals that they've been supporting or managing, and they want to be able to better connect with them. And so right off the bat, these are the different reasons. I see Reinhardt right off the bat saying that their hubby did it, but not personally, and that he loves it. So it's good to hear, Reinhardt, that you've got some experience with the platform, or I guess that's Wanda. Excuse
Wanda,
me.
yes.
Yep. Great. So good to hear that, Wanda. Curious what language they're learning, but you don't have to share that right now. What is the cost of not having a bilingual team? That is often the question that people start to ask themselves before they even reach out to us. And there's some data here from the American Council on Teaching of Foreign Languages, and they found that 90% of employers rely heavily on employees who can speak a language other than English, and 25% of US employers lost business due to a lack of foreign language skills. We can probably think of a variety of different scenarios where this is the case, but a lot of people that come to us, they're asking themselves this question: what is the cost of not having bilingual people on the team? And another question that comes up quite often is, what are the risks of not having a bilingual team? And we think about OSHA and, in the construction industry, we read articles all the time about individuals that have been hurt or really tragic accidents because people weren't able to communicate effectively. And so in this day and age where there's a war on talent, people are trying to retain their people. Employees more than anything want to not, necessarily have fun little perks, but they want to grow professionally. They want to be able to acquire skills that will impact them at work and outside of work. We're seeing that language learning is something that is age is old. It's been around forever, but it is now looking more and more like something that people are really looking seriously to, which is interesting because in Europe, where I lived for a while, language learning is something that's second nature to everyone. I lived in Germany where people, they're raised knowing German and English, and a lot of times another language as well. And so it's really exciting to see in the United States, people are starting to look past maybe their failed 3 years of Spanish in high school and starting to believe that, hey, I can learn a language. And so just a few other stats that were taken from Glassdoor. We see that 8 in 10 people surveyed would prefer additional perks to a pay raise, which is exciting. A positive onboarding experience can increase retention by 82%, and 87% of individuals felt more confident working with coworkers and clients when they were able to bridge that language gap. And this is my last data slide, I promise. But in the United States, there's a staggering statistic that in 2021, 24% of non-retired Hispanic adults quit or left a job. That's a lot. 63% quit a job in 2021 because there was no opportunities for career advancement. And 80% of US workers that were researched by the Pew Research Center said that they felt stressed because of ineffective company communication. And so this is the why, because people want to be able to communicate, and communication is the first bridge between two humans being able to work together in a way that matters. And so I guess I'm curious right off the bat, before I go into the Babbel product, is there anyone here that maybe has experienced a communication gap in a professional setting anytime in the last 5 years? And like I said, this is not just going to be me just talking to you the whole time. So I want to hear maybe from 1 or 2 people about an experience you had where language was a barrier, or maybe with an organization you worked with.
Hi, this is Wanda. Oh, go ahead.
No, please, Wanda.
Go
Oh,
ahead, Wanda.
this is Wanda, and this wasn't that recent, but one of the things I recall in my career, there was I want to say maybe employee handbook or some kind of documentation we were working on. And at the time we had some employees where Spanish was their first language. And one of the things that we learned early on is that you have to be careful with the dialect and the culture because not all languages come across with the way that you mean to communicate. So what we did was we had drafted this document, and the company that worked with us at the time, it was written very formally, but our employee population took offense to it to some degree because they felt like it was formal Spanish and not Spanish in the dialect that they were comfortable with. So I learned very early on that beyond just language to language translation, you have to factor in the audience who's going to be receiving the communications.
Absolutely, Wanda. Thank you for sharing that anecdote of your experience, because a lot of times people say like, hey, I want to learn Spanish. And the reality is that Spanish, it has its own world of dialects and nuances within it. At Babbel, one of the things that we do is we provide our learners the opportunity to learn Spanish as spoken in Spain, or Latin American Spanish. And we recognize that Latin American Spanish isn't going to encompass all of Latin America. And so we have this thing called culture bites, and we weave culture into it so that as learners are engaging in Latin American Spanish, they can be notified, hey, this is how you would pronounce this word if you were in Venezuela versus Mexico, because those nuances are really important. I will say no program out there is going to perfectly be able to hone in on each region of each country, because it is different everywhere. But certainly we strive to acknowledge not just the difference in the language, but the cultural nuances between that as well. And that's something I'll show you in a second, something that we call culture bites.
Anyone else have an anecdote to perhaps share?
Yeah, I've worked within the last 5 years. I've worked with a lot of programmers and developers from India, and English is not their native language. And it took a lot of just slowing way down from both sides to communicate effectively in what could have been a 15-minute meeting turned into an hour-long meeting, because having to repeat things over and over, or having to slow way down just so you could be understood. Whereas if you could communicate with each other in a native language, it'd go a lot quicker and a lot faster.
Very cool.
Yeah. And Brett, that's what we are, consistently hearing from our partners and people that are looking to possibly partner with us, is that the time that it takes sometimes to get your point across, that adds up. And I'll think of I'll give an example of a partner that we have down in Texas. It's a global enterprise, and they have a team of Spanish speaking employees, a shift actually, where it's all Spanish speaking employees, and the manager, their supervisor, isn't bilingual. And so the head of the plant reached out to me. He said, it is our #1 priority to give these individuals the opportunity to learn English, but more importantly, we need to meet them where they're at. We need to make sure that our managers are learning Spanish, so we're not putting the onus on them to learn English. We want to give them that opportunity. And lo and behold, what often would be a 30 to 45 minute, people standing around waiting for directions while they found someone to be bilingual, has turned into maybe a couple minutes of this person communicating with his people on the manufacturing line. And so, Brett, those minutes, those hours, they add up. And I'll actually, before I dive into the product, I'll actually share with you a little case study that was done. And this was really powerful to me, because we do see that a lot of our partners are, they may have a team of people overseas in India or maybe in the Philippines. And one of their objectives is to, help them improve their English so that they can be a little bit smoother. But we see a lot of call centers reaching out to us, which probably doesn't come as a huge surprise. And I think this is a pretty interesting case study. So let me just pull it up here.
And Anthony, as you're looking for that, I've got an aside for the rest of our Technology Review Council. How many systems have you seen demonstrated in the HR world that are multilingual? Lots of them. And so what they've done is they've personalized, let's say, my access to self-service that is multilingual, so I can pick my preferences. But it doesn't quite match up with the culture because the rest of the organization is not speaking to me in my language. The systems are speaking to me in my language. So I think, to your point, Anthony, I think rounding out the cultural, I want to say, motivation, I want to be able to communicate to my employees in all forms. I think it's a pretty important situation. So there's a lot of money being spent to, so we say, modify the systems to be able to do that, but we haven't modified the people to do that. So I like your style. That's what our conversation was very much at the conference along this. So please go back to your case study, please.
Yeah. And just to that point, Nav, is, we get so many partners that after they've been with us for a while, they say, we used a translation service for 10 years, 15 years. And we just realized that was a Band-Aid. And it was finally time for us to invest in our people so that they could do the work of that translation service. And so that those people felt better about the work they're doing. Our customers felt better because no one wants to talk through a translation service. We're
Right.
humans. Human connection is something that I think, especially over the last 5 years, we've really realized how important it is. And this is a way to kind of break down those barriers. And not to be all over the place, but let's talk about this case study. This is a call center, all right? This call center reached out to us because they were having a lot of challenges with supporting their Spanish-speaking customers. And they ran an analysis, and they had 4 team members, and those team members had about 65 calls a day. They found that those calls were taking about 7 minutes. But they found that when they were speaking with an native English speaker that was calling, that those calls were taking about 4 to 5 minutes. And so they said, if we're doing this many calls a day, this amount of time is adding up. And you can see here that, the total call time here was 1,820 minutes. Each person was getting paid $15 an hour. So the daily cost to hit their target broke down to that. After they were able to move up to the next proficiency level using Babbel, they actually were able to cut those call times down to 5 minutes, which broke down to 1,300 minutes. And ultimately, they were able to hit their call target, but with considerably less time, saving them almost $34,000 in a year with just 4 people getting bilingual. Nova, I will send this to you after this call if anyone's interested in taking a look at it. But this is an example of how the, how this can really, change the financial dynamics of a company as well.
You stated that stat about people leaving and so on. I think that to me, being able to have, instead of everybody thinking they have to speak English, that we can communicate on multiple levels, different languages and so on, is a retention device when you really get down to it. And in this day and age, it's not a bad idea. So going back to example of talking to folks in India, you're linking the time, and if those are contractors, that's costing you a lot of money. So absolutely.
Yeah, and we have a lot of partners that say, hey, we want some of these individuals that are based in India or in the Philippines. We want them to be able to meet with a one-on-one instructor. They know English, They need to work on their pronunciation, being able to understand as people are speaking. These are all things that we do because we recognize that every organization is different. And so with that being said, I want to share my screen again to kind of give everyone on here an understanding of really what does Babbel do? You know, like we're teaching people language, we're kind of bridging that communication gap, but how do we go about doing that? And you know, in a nutshell, the way we go about doing that is we provide our learners with options. And so we offer, if you're a native English speaker, we offer 14 languages, but we offer tons of different language combinations. We are the only program that is actually teaching different based on the native language. So let me give you an example. If I'm learning Spanish, my experience should be drastically different than someone that is a native Italian speaker learning Spanish. We shouldn't just get the same curriculum because our native languages are different. And Babbel is the only program that is actually addressing the native language and the nuances of that as you're learning the secondary language. The other thing that we're doing with our blended learning model is we're giving your learners, all learners, the opportunity to have classes with certified teachers, one-on-one classes, small group classes. And in addition to that, providing all types of supplemental content. And now I'm curious, and you can just, you know, maybe say yes in the chat box, but I'm curious, how many people have heard of the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages? Because I hadn't until I moved to Germany for a while, but I'm curious if anyone has heard of that. And as I'm waiting forever, because maybe no one's heard of it, this is kind of, yeah, thanks for sharing, Jessica. I also had not heard of it until I lived in Europe. But if you go to Europe, you'll find that everyone there is talking about their proficiency levels. Oh, I'm a B2 in Italian and I'm a A2 in German. This is basically how they measure their proficiency level. This is Babbel, which is actually a German company. This is how we measure our learners' proficiency. When they log in, they get placed at a specific level, and we're then able to, you know, give them a personalized learning experience. And I love this slide, even though it might feel a little busy, because this slide gives you an idea of what Babbel for Business offers. So you've all heard of, a lot of people have heard of Babbel. You can go on, you can get it, you can learn a language. Babbel for Business is actually what I focus on, which is providing the most robust learning experience for our partners to ensure that they can meet their business needs, but also allow their learners to meet their personal needs as well. And so there's a few things on here that really get me excited because this is where I see the impact. First off, we offer self-paced lessons. And everyone on here, I'm assuming, is very familiar with micro-learning. And Nova, I know this is something that we spoke about. We want to make sure that when a learner is on Babbel, they don't have to carve out 45 minutes to an hour every time they log in. All they need is 5 to 15 minutes. Because the research shows that when you take things in bite-sized chunks, it sticks more. But the other reality is that everyone is working a lot. Everyone has a life outside of work. And the biggest barrier to learning a language is not the desire. It is finding the time. And I'm sure we're all thinking right now about something we want to do, but we can't find the time to do it. Hopefully it's not the dishes. But just know that this is what Babbel is about, providing micro-learning and a wide umbrella of learning opportunities. And so I'm going to show you what these lessons look like. I'm going to show you what my favorite thing, Babbel Live, looks like, where you actually get to work in a small group with a certified teacher. And then I'm going to show you some of these supplemental things that we offer so you can understand how someone that wants to get proficient in a language can go about doing it with our platform. And so let me go here real quick. Can you all see my screen? It should look a little, oh, share this tab instead. Cool.
Yeah.
Should look a little different now. Perfect. Great. So right off the bat, I'm learning Spanish. And this is the home screen. And you can see here right off the bat, it's showing me, hey, start your lesson or do your review. And so I currently, I've done a few different courses. Introducing yourself, where are you from, how are you? You can click on that and you can see all the different micro lessons that I completed in these courses, certificates. But the current course I'm working on is called Where Do You Work? And Babbel is all about getting learners conversational. Some programs out there that really just drive home conjugation, conjugation, conjugation. We focus on that, of course, but we don't want to basically drown our learners in that. We want to give them practical things that they can use to have a conversation, to greet one of their colleagues, start to bridge that gap. And so this specific one, Where Do You Work? You can see here's the lesson that I've completed. Once again, remember these lessons 5 to 15 minutes long. And then there's 8 total lessons in this one. One of my favorite things, and being a former public school teacher, I recognize that giving agency to a learner is essential. So whenever it's time to review, you as the learner get to choose how you want to review. And so we make it really easy for even the most non-tech savvy people to come in and say, all right, I know that I'm supposed to work on my prescribed lesson right here. The other thing that we want to make sure we're giving all learners is the opportunity to do content that is different than just the kind of prescribed content for you. Because you know what, some days you wake up and you go, you know what, I feel like doing something about food and family, or making plans, or meeting neighbors. I like to call this thematic content, where your learners are able to kind of choose different themes. Maybe you've got a trip to Mexico coming up and you want to practice getting around. We've got 8 micro lessons just on that. But let's say you've got a big meeting coming up, and I see we've got a question here.
Oh, yeah, from Wanda. Yeah.
Wanda. Oh, that's so cool, Wanda. I love that.
I can see Wanda and Anthony, pair them up and you guys can have a conversation.
That's right. That's right.
Good deal.
I love it.
Before you go too much further, if you don't mind my asking, Anthony, and I neglected to ask this when we were even meeting, is this delivered on the mobile platform? And my reasoning behind that is I can take it home with me.
Absolutely. We see that about 85% of our users use their smartphone. So their
Very cool.
Android, their iPhone. I personally, in the morning, when my 15-month-old son is kind of throwing eggs around the table, I try and get a lesson in there on my phone. And then I usually carve out time at about 4:45 to do a lesson on my desktop at home. So just know you can do it on any device. And you also have the ability to download lessons in the case you're going to go on a flight. Or maybe if you're an individual that doesn't have an unlimited data plan or reliable Wi-Fi at home, we want to make sure we are really being as equitable as possible so everyone has the opportunity to learn. And so,
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. This other topic I chose here, because this is something that's probably relevant to a lot of people, is business Spanish. And let's say you don't know any Spanish, you probably don't dive right into business Spanish at first, but once you kind of have a good foundation, you can start to take lessons. I mean, you can do it whenever you want, but we wouldn't suggest this is the first thing you do. But around meeting management, writing emails, phone calls, office life, closing the deal, refreshing conversations at work. So long story short, we want to make sure that your learners have the opportunity to tap into things that either speak to their needs at work or speak to their soul and interests. And this is what gets people to continue to sign into Babbel, because there's things that are really relevant to them. Another really cool thing is that we offer podcasts. And so you can click on this. I'm going to share this tab instead here. And you can see here, multiple podcasts. Aventura on the Babbel Express. This is for our A2 learners. A0 to A Hero. This is for our A1 learners. And you can see this is focused on Spanish as spoken in Spain. Palabras Bravas. This is more for our B1 and B2 learners, more intermediate and upper intermediate. You can see we got the Spain flag there. The one that I'm doing right now is called Un Día en Español. And this is for our A1, A2 learners. And you can see there's that Mexican flag. So this is a bit more focused on Latin American Spanish. And one of the things that's really cool is that your learners, as they're engaging in this podcast, they have options. And these options are, let me show you here, is that when we think about a podcast, we think, hey, I'm walking the dog, or maybe I'm commuting to work. These podcasts are micro podcasts. Each episode is about 5 to 10 minutes long. And if you aren't driving your car or walking your dog, you can actually go and click on a little link. And it's almost like a little study guide where you've got all the vocabulary. And then my favorite thing is these dynamic transcripts where you can listen to the podcast, follow along. We've got maps and photographs and other media that allows you to immerse yourself into that podcast in a multi-sensory way. And so we're trying to just take the extra step to really ensure that our learners are engaged and they're having fun, because that is part of the learning process. It should be enjoyable. And so the last few things here, culture bites. Remember, all of our cultural stuff is woven into every single lesson, but you can also come here and you can click on, how are you? You say, hey, what's up? And it's really common in Latin America. People don't always say, ¿Cómo estás? They might say, ¿Qué onda? Which is a bit more informal, like saying, hey, what's up? And so you can read these culture bites in English or in Spanish, and you can listen to them. But just know that we weave this stuff into our lessons as well, because we truly believe you can't learn language if you're not also learning the culture. And I think, Wanda, that kind of resonated with your story about making sure that you're honoring the dialect and the region where people are coming from in regards to learning a language. I think we may have a question here. Yeah. So Roy is asking a question. Do you have any stats showing that your approach is more effective than other language learning products? So Roy, what I can show you is how effective we are. I'm not here to say that we're more or less effective. I mean, one of the most common products that we see people familiar with is Rosetta Stone. We are very, very, very different from Rosetta Stone, because Rosetta Stone doesn't believe in microlearning, and they don't believe in providing customized lessons that are aligned to the business needs of an industry. And those are things that we do. I'll show you that data in just a second, Roy, but I want you just to see this piece here. Our Babbel Live and Babbel Intensive, those are what we provide to our learners when they want to take a class with a live teacher. And we do true blended learning, where we've aligned the self-paced experience and your live classes. So I'm looking here, I'm an A1 because I'm still learning Spanish. I'm looking at Friday. Maybe I'll take a class Friday. Look at all the variety of classes we have. Midnight, 3 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m. I'm going to just scroll down. I'm only to 10 a.m. here. So let's do describing a room. I could book this with Martine. We've got our self-paced lessons that align to this live class. All right. You can download the class materials so that you can be really prepared, but you can also cancel the class. Flexibility is the name of the game in this day and age, and your learners can cancel the class. But one thing that we do that no other program is doing is we're aligning the self-paced experience to the classes that you can be taking. So if I'm working on Unit 1, I know, okay, here's 5 different classes I could take that align to what I'm doing. This is essential for our learners to not feel overwhelmed and lost. We want to provide direction. We don't want to say, yeah, just choose any class. You can, but we say, these are the classes that might make sense based on your language learning process and where you're at. The other thing we offer is Babbel Intensive. And this is where your learners are able to meet with a specific teacher. And you can, book a class with your teacher, and you can see here, plug in here exactly what you want them to focus on. And your teams can also work with our customer success team, and we can provide curriculum to our instructors. So let's say you own a landscaping company. You don't want your learners at a certain point to just do generic lessons. You want them to learn about the vocabulary and do role playing in situations that they'd find themselves in. Just know that's what we do. And no other program is truly doing that, as well as providing that blended learning experience. And so, Roy, let's get to your question now, which is, how effective is Babbel and what does the data show? And we've had a couple studies done on us. City University of New York did a study on us. Yale did a study. Nov, I'm happy to send you all these things afterwards so you can share it out with your community.
Please do. I think that would work out well. I always send a kind of a after session with the link. So yeah, those would be great.
Yep, and I'll send you the case study that I shared as well. So I'm just taking note of that right now. But let me share this tab here. All right, Roy, thanks for your patience. But the way it works is basically we've been in business for over 15 years. And so we've been able to identify how many minutes a week does a learner need to use our program to move up to the next proficiency level. And what we've seen is that 45 minutes a week, so that could be 3 15-minute sessions a week, or however you want to break it out, would mean that those learners would move up to that next proficiency level. So that could be like A2 to B1 or A1 to A2 in 10 months. Now, we do see that a majority of our partners, specifically ones that have acute business needs, will want to have their learners doing more than just the self-paced. They'll say, we want them to do maybe 1 class a week, sometimes more, sometimes maybe like once every couple weeks. And we see that when taking that blended learning approach of having that certified teacher as well as the self-paced and committing 75 minutes a week, you can move up to that next proficiency level in 6 months. And so this essentially is accumulated hours of about 30 hours. And what we've also seen from City University of New York on the study they did on us, we actually didn't know they were doing the study on us, but they found that 15 hours on Babbel is the equivalent of 1 full college semester of Spanish. So Roy, I hope that kind of gives you a little bit more perspective on the weekly commitment of time and how that translates to moving up proficiency levels, but also this other kind of perspective of how many hours, does it mean, how's that relate to a typical semester? So this is what we've seen.
Anthony, I was going to ask, if you don't mind, I'll ask a real quick question. So is the emphasis on speaking the language, writing the language, reading it, or some combination thereof?
Great question. It's a combination, but ultimately our goal is to get you conversational. So the main, first and foremost goal is to be able to speak and listen and have a conversation. Our one-on-one classes do a lot of emphasis on writing, if that's something that's a priority for our learner, because remember, those one-on-one classes look different for every person based on their proficiency level and based on their specific needs. And that leads me to the next thing, which is administrators, they need to know what's going on. And so we offer an administrator dashboard. I'll actually go back a few slides here, where you're able to track key learning metrics: days active, lessons completed, reviews completed, minutes active on the platform. And so we give all that to the users, to the administrators, so that they can really have the transparency over what's happening in the platform. They also have the ability to transfer licenses. So with Babbel for Business, if you have an employee that leaves the organization, odds are you don't want to keep paying for them to learn a language. You can delete them and put someone else in that license seat in a matter of seconds. So you can transfer licenses. You can see how your learners are using the program. And also for those learners that are doing those one-on-one classes, those instructors are certified to provide that CEFR assessment that I mentioned. So they can place them at their exact proficiency level. And then they do that every 3 months so that the learner is able to understand the growth they're making, as well as be able to have the administrators track the proficiency levels of the individuals that they're investing in this product. So when it comes to proficiency levels and the optics for administrators, you can see everything from minutes on the platform to proficiency levels, as well as your learners can download their certificates every time they complete a course in the platform. And so our customer success managers who support the administrators with the overall health of the partnership are there to support. We also have something called a learner success manager. They actually are not focused on the administrators. They're focused on the learners. And their job is to be there to provide support in any way possible through office hours, resources, and tips and tricks to make sure that every learner is getting the best experience possible and ideally learning a language. And so I know that we've got about 10 or so minutes left. I wanted to just kind of stop here, take any questions that anyone has, and also just kind of get some feedback on what everyone out there is seeing in regards to, language gaps at work. And I'll put this up in case anyone wants my contact information.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Always happy to chat. You can see, can you see in the bottom left-hand corner? Sometimes I know it gets cut off here, but.
I thought the slide would be in multiple languages, but that's okay. No, I'm just kidding. You had a tough time. Sorry, Anthony. Couldn't resist. Certainly, anybody, please open up your mic if you'd like to ask a question. While we're waiting, I do have a quick question for you, and that is, so as you're granting certificates for the various courses I'm taking, are you seeing that your clients are kind of moving that into the learning world that says, okay, Nov's taking these classes, I want to give him the credit, if you will, so that when the manager goes and looks at my performance and says, hey, you've taken about 6 hours to learn the language and so on, let's do stuff. In other words, I see a lot of people recognizing that the investment in their people is not just doing the work, it's in continuing, I want to say, personal and career development. And you want to be able to track that. So I think what I'm asking is, can you take your certifications and move them into a profile to keep an eye on all the things I've done?
So that's a great question. What we typically see our partners do is they'll have some type of expectation. A lot of our partners have their learners sign a learner agreement, and a lot of our partners give bonuses or there's pay increases when people can get to a certain proficiency level. And so this is something that is very common. I think when it comes to certificates, I've definitely seen organizations set it up to say, hey, every time you get a certificate, please email it to your manager or put it in this folder so that you have proof of that. So these are things that we see, but we don't have necessarily a folder within Babbel for those things to be stored. But you can always go back. You go into the achievements section that I showed you in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And any of your achievements, you can click on them and your certificate's right there to download.
Perfect. And then the other thing that came up, I'm seeing an awful lot of engagement programs and onboarding programs that are providing mentors, if you will, mentorship, if you will. Somebody's new to the organization, and so therefore here's an acclimation process with a senior person, perhaps, or introduce you to others in the organization and so on. I suspect that would potentially, as time goes on, probably have to include Babbel as a way of doing that. In other words, give that manager or the mentors more variability and flexibility as who they could mentor. I think in the long run, this kind of a little bit of a hint to you. You and I have talked about, you may want to talk to some of the companies that are doing these mentoring situations, because it would be a very, very key aspect of being able to say, I can mentor people in 4 different languages, however that works.
We are seeing across the board this desire to improve the onboarding experience and to recognizing that when someone has been onboarded, it doesn't mean they're done learning. It doesn't mean, and so we're seeing more and more people that are in charge of onboarding wanting to acquire that second or third language so that they can better suit their employees as really one of their first touch points of being on the job. But those people are often saying, I also want to touch base with these people once they are done onboarding and continue to support them and they're not able to do that if they can't speak the language of the person. And so I think that's a really, really big piece of kind of where things are going. A better onboarding experience for your employees is going to mean more likely that they'll stick around, you know.
Very good point.
You know, real quick though, Roy had another question. He was wondering,
Oh,
is
yes,
there a
please.
consumer version or is this geared only to businesses? Roy, there is a consumer version. So if you're interested in checking it out, go and definitely explore it. When it comes to the business side, there's a lot of content and things that are available on the business side that aren't available for direct to consumer. But absolutely, I'd say if you want to kind of get a taste of what Babbel's all about, definitely check out the consumer side for a little bit. And you got my information. Feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to get you some more info as well.
Yeah, Roy moved from New Jersey to Cape Cod, I think it was. So they do speak another language up there.
From New York to Cape Cod.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Not New Jersey, New York. They speak
Roy,
another language.
my manager, Babbel, he's from Boston, but he's got a little house on the Cape. So I'm telling him I'm ready to come and to have our next meeting on site at his Cape house.
Good
man.
Anthony, this is Julie Jones, and I saw early you had some stats from some call centers, which were very impressive. I have worked through my career with setting up global call centers, global HR service centers to support different regions. This tool is amazing. I would have loved to have had something like this during the time of our initiation when we were trying to at least start these centers many, many years ago. But with that said, a few things. Is Babbel more applicable in some regions of the globe, or do you feel that the tool is applicable in within any of the regions around the globe? I worked within 40 different countries. And then secondly, as your company begins partnering more with some of the call centers around the globe, are you helping to build any consortium to share best practices among some of these groups?
Yeah, so I'll start with the consortium question. The answer is it's something that we want to do, but we haven't started doing it yet.
Okay.
So I think that not just with call centers, you know, we've got small construction companies that are all in the same region, and you know, I think there's just a lot of opportunity for that, for us to not only make Babbel for Business more accessible to maybe some of these smaller organizations, where we could bring them together and maybe bundle some type of pricing for them. But also, I think, to your point, the knowledge sharing. And that's where we are starting to see our job is not just to provide an amazing product with amazing support, but to be the thought leader in language learning, because a lot of our partners, this is new. You know, they've never done this. They're looking to us for answers. So I think that second piece really resonates with me, because it's something I've been bringing up, of saying, how can we make ourselves more visible to some of these smaller organizations and allow them to work with each other and get on board together, so that they can, you know, even though, you know, they're different LLCs, but they have the same goals. And so that's something very interesting. The first part of the question was, where are we seeing most traction and where are we seeing most impact? That's how I kind of took it. Is that a fair way to, like, globally?
Absolutely.
Yep. So in the United States, it's pretty straightforward. We are seeing a huge need of language, or of individuals learning Spanish. And we're seeing in Mexico and other areas in Central and South America, individuals wanting to learn English. I mean, it's I'd say 95% of our business in the United States is either learning Spanish or learning English. But we are a global company. And of course, when you go over to the DACH region in Europe, you don't have many people trying to learn Latin American Spanish. You've got people wanting to learn English. And so that is really where we see a lot of our business overseas, because you know, English is kind of the global language. And so a lot of Italian companies, a lot of German companies, French is growing considerably. And then we've got, India, we've got the Philippines, where we've got that unique scenario where a lot of those individuals, they speak some English, but wanting to improve is the goal right now. So we're seeing a lot of different regions. Eastern Europe, I think one thing that I will share, Nov, with you is, this is something that I'm super proud of, is that when the war broke out in Ukraine, Babbel halted all business operations. And we then went into hyperdrive to build out our product so that a native Ukrainian speaker could learn English, Polish, or German completely for free. And as you can imagine, that's not an easy thing to do. And we literally, I think at that time, I think we had 800 people at the company. We literally put pause on everything just so we could build this out and provide it for these refugees that were moving to these different areas of the world. And so our impact, it's global. Certainly some areas more than others, but we certainly recognize that it's a big responsibility to be giving individuals this opportunity. So that's why we have 150 people on our didactics team that are solely focused on the user experience and them truly becoming bilingual or trilingual or multilingual, however many languages it is there,
Thank you.
So I heard the words terrific, Julie. Yeah, I think there are many instances where this would have been a great product to have our hands. We are nearing the hour. Any last questions? Or certainly, I think Anthony would appreciate any perspectives of, do you love the product? Yeah, it's okay, whatever. I personally am enamored with this, and I have worked with a number of companies where that language barrier usually exists in the field, if you will. The construction, like you say, maybe the landscaping companies, maybe other types of construction. So just the language barrier, and it has. To me, I've got a list I just put together. I'll be introducing you to a number of my clients because I think they would see this as a very, very big plus to do that. Global mobility has also shown up in a lot of different positions I'm seeing these days being posted. And so the ability to speak multiple languages, or at least absorb quickly, to then give me the opportunity to have an overseas assignment or something of that nature, it's just become an important part of the culture and the workforce as a whole. The ability to move around in different places, start up a factory in another country and such. So yeah, I think the product is definitely in the right place. It certainly sounds like a good thing. Any other comments from the review council? Any perspectives? If not, what we will ask, Anthony, is if you get further down the road and find some really cool stuff, this idea of ChatGPT and all the other fun stuff that's coming up with AI could maybe accelerate, even in some cases, the kinds of things you're going to offer. We'd love to invite you back.
Yep, I'll keep you in the loop on this all. No, we are absolutely ChatGPT, all that stuff. In our Slack channels, people are, it's happening. We are investing in those things to make sure that we are competitive, but more importantly, giving our learners the best opportunity to learn a language.
Yep, absolutely great. And thank you to the Technology Review Council. Again, thank you for attending. Thank you for bearing with my, shall we say, technical difficulties at the beginning here. But we will have further vendors lining up behind us. I'm just absolutely thrilled with our partnership with IRM as well. They have been doing an outstanding job of getting us out there. And I will send you that post that IRM put out there for you on Anthony for Babbel's session today. So thank you all. Stay well, everyone. Take good care. Bye.
Thanks, Nov.
Bye. Thank you.